studios in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. This is the Spit Sports Show. I hope everyone is doing just phenomenal today. I'm sorry that I've been away for a little while. I'll explain why at the end of the video, but before that, we have so much to get to with this Vancouver Canucks season and where we're at right now. We are 4 days out from the most busy day in hockey, trade deadline day. And the Canucks going into this trade deadline were really at a crossroads coming out of this Four Nations tournament. They had a 5-game road trip coming out of it, and everyone kind of had the same thought that their performance coming out of the Four Nations would really tell us a lot about how this team was going to move forward throughout the rest of the season, especially considering the fact that they were right on the edge for that wild card spot. The playoffs are really in jeopardy, but they still could make them. But the Canucks responded to that crossroads by playing 5 of their worst games of the entire season. They went 1-4 on the road trip with losses to teams like Utah, Anaheim, and Seattle. Um, Add on to that, the piss on top of the cake, if you will. It's reported that Quinn Hughes is not going to be 100% for the rest of the year. That's according to head coach Rick Tocchet. I don't know if anyone's really 100% at this point of the year, but the fact that he's coming right out and saying that leads me to believe that there was a bit of injury mismanagement on the Vancouver Canucks part here, especially because when Hughes originally had this abductor injury, they're reporting it as, it was day to day. So the fact that this has been nearly a 4-5 week process is just tough to wrap your head around, considering how insignificant the injury felt at the start. So with where the Canucks are at, barely hanging on to the second wild card spot, and even if they do make the playoffs, I think everyone can acknowledge they're kind of drawing dead against whoever they play in the first round. People are wondering what happened in this last 9-month period, because it feels like just yesterday the Canucks were in game 7 against the eventual Western Conference Stanley Cup finalists with a chance to move on to the conference finals. And there is no singular answer to what has happened to the Canucks in the past 9 to 12 month span, because hockey isn't linear. It's a bunch of dominoes that knock each other down and, evolve slowly into what you see today. It's a lot like Breaking Bad. If you've seen that show, it's just like little things add up to the point where a guy slowly develops from a high school chemistry teacher to a big time, criminal. But there is no singular answer, is what I mean. We want one as a hockey loving city like we are. I'd love to just pin the tail on the Pedersen here and say, our best players played like garbage. That's the reason. Or our head coach is, not great, blah, blah, blah. But once I actually analyze what's happened with this team, and I don't look at it from my immediate fan reaction, this is why I do a podcast. I like to look at things from a different perspective than what most people would. I can't put really any blame on Rick Tocchet. And I'll get to Pedersen in a bit, but starting with him, they were the worst, the Canucks were the worst defensive team in the entire league under Bruce Boudreau. There weren't 32 teams in the league at the time, but they were 31 out of 31. The Canucks and sports teams in general, if I'm being honest, but definitely the more prominent sports franchises, they scapegoat bad coaches because it's such an easy, quick fix. Like, I was talking to a local coach the other day who I do some work for, and he said something that I never really thought of before, but it is true the more that I thought about it, which is they hire me so they can fire me. And basically what that means is they hire me so I can coach the team to the best of my abilities, but when I fail, it's my fault and they can fire me and say it was his fault and move on, with a clean slate. But when it comes to Rick Tocchet, it's so hard for me to play that scapegoat game with him because pretty much all of the Canucks' core pieces in terms of scoring, which has been easily the team's main issue this season, they actually average more points with him than without him for their careers. Connor Garland, Elias Pettersson, Brock Besser, Jake DeBrusk, they all have higher points per game under Rick Tocchet than they had for the rest of the coaches they played for. So to me, this has a lot less to do with the coaching because the Canucks offense was fine last year. It was middle of the pack. It was right where it needed to be. A few things have happened since last season to the offense, starting on the defensive side, actually, which has a huge impact on the offensive side. So Hronek goes down real early in the year. Hughes has been dealing with injuries throughout. I believe Susie is out for the year. Obviously lost Zadorov last year. And the reason why that's such a big issue for the offense is when you're in the NHL and the ice is so condensed, it is of the highest importance for a defenseman to jump up in the play and make it essentially a four-man rush instead of a three-man rush. We saw this the entire Four Nations tournament with Canada, where John Cooper was basically coaching whatever offside defenseman there is, you need to skate up and support that puck. So if there's a rebound, if there's a spot in the slot available, you can fill that in and create goals. And with the injuries to Hughes, Hronek, and losing Zadorov and not playing Brandstrom, the Canucks completely lost that element of a defenseman jumping up into the play consistently, which is just an offensive killer. Add on to that, when the Canucks do eventually get the puck in the offensive zone, they play this just such a monotonous and basic style of win a puck battle in the corner, send it back to the D, get a bit of traffic in front, and send a point shot and just pray it gets through. Now, listen, I'm not opposed to that strategy, especially in tight contested playoff games where it feels like that's the best chance you have at getting a puck through is basically just throwing it at the net. But in regular season games, I've seen the Canucks be creative in the offensive zone, even this season. But it just seems like at their root, the base play they always just come back to is a shot from the point instead of trying to create something of a bit more quality. And when it comes to quality chances, the Canucks aren't generating enough of them because they are dead last, 32 of 32 in chances created off of zone rush entries. So what that means is instead of dumping and chasing, rushing the puck into the zone, someone carrying it, they are dead last in chances created off that exact situation. So why are they dead last in those situations? Well, if you ask any NHL coach, GM, player, or even just watch the game, you'll know that speed and transition speed and rush zone speed all comes through the middle. All of it comes down to your centers and how quickly they can pivot from defense to offense and vice versa. And you don't have to take my word for that. This is what Jake DeBrusk had to say about this. Speed through the middle is probably the number one thing I think for every rush team, DeBrusk said. You can have wingers that are fast, but you need it going through the middle to distribute. So with that, we kind of come to the root of the Canucks' offensive issues, don't we? Now, Filipino is actually leading the league in zone rush entry percentage. Zone rush entry percentage success rate, which is awesome. And his speed coming through the neutral zone has been just a cherry to my eye. But outside of him, Suter's really slow, flatly. Bluger is pretty slow. And Pedersen has been all-time bad this season in terms of his explosion and how just his attitude and his hesitancy and basically everything. And I want to get into this quickly because I could pull up every stat that you guys have probably seen on Twitter about how Pedersen is. I think the one where Miller has more points than he has shots since Miller left is crazy. He also might not hit 50 points this season and he makes $11.6 million. Now, in the past, I have put a lot of that on the catastrophic knee tendonitis that I think he has and hasn't reported. because then he would kind of be seen as damaged goods throughout the league. But I think he has a genuine knee crisis happening because I just don't understand how a guy at 26 years old can go from being one of the fastest burst players in the NHL to being literally at the bottom of that list for the last 6 months. And it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand how, again, the Canucks have managed this so poorly because my motto as well, which kind of conflicts with my opinion on Pedersen, is if you're out there, no excuses. You have Pedersen on your back. You have to play well. But I just feel like this is such a recurring issue that just isn't going away, such a nagging injury that it's just like I might as well play through it. And I think they should sit him down because I really think this knee is a thing. If it's not, then flatly, this might just be the worst contract in the NHL. Right now, it's Huberdeau's. I think he's at about 10 and a half. Pedersen's a million more than that, and he's arguably worse. But Pedersen is only one element to this offensive destitute area that the Canucks have been in for the past little while. He's probably the biggest part of it. I'm not trying to make excuses for him. He's been awful, and I've hated everything pretty much about his season. Really, really bad. I think he has the knee excuse, which hasn't been reported again, but regardless, he's been terrible. A big part of it, though, has been the third line, which last year was probably the best third line in the NHL and was the second best line on the Canucks. So last year, Joshua, Bluger, Garland was the second best line on the Canucks in terms of goal percentage at 58.4%. Really, they were only behind the line of Suter, Miller, and Besser, who were at 64%. This season, though, I don't know what's happened, but Garland, Joshua, Suter, which is the line that they've gone with instead of Bluger, they are sixth on the team in terms of goal percentage at 44.6. Now, why Talkett hasn't just switched out Suter for Bluger on that line to try to get that chemistry back, I have no idea. No clue. I think that might be one of the dumbest coaching decisions he's made all season. But unfortunately, I think the primary culprit of the drop off from this line is Joshua. Because I understand he missed time at the start of the year. It was totally out of his control. But since he's been back, he's played in 35 games and has only 7 points. And just when you watch him play, it seems like he's not quite as physically assertive as he was last year. Now he's doing well in the hits category, second on the team behind only Kiefer Sherwood. But I'm talking about puck battles in corners and just little plays where you're trying to check a guy for an extra second so he doesn't blow by you to get the puck in the corner. And I just feel like Joshua has been a little tentative, and soft is a little too harsh, but definitely not the same amount of aggression that he had last year. And I don't know if that has to do with the tumor that he found or just taking some time to find his legs or whatever it may be. But I have not seen the same Dakota Joshua from last season to this season. And the stats absolutely back it up. So his goals above shooting talent last year was a 6.1. And goals above shooting talent is basically they rate everybody in the NHL throughout the year as their skill as a shooter and then take their goals and average it out. It's people who are a lot smarter than I am coming up with this stuff. But last year it was 6.1, which was nearly led the league. This year it's minus 0.6, which is actually right around his career average. I think in a contract year, he had the best year of his life. And more power to him. But as a franchise, that's not the spot you want to be at, paying a guy at his high point. So Pedersen's been the worst. The third line's been pretty bad. There's kind of your reason for the Canucks not scoring. Add on to the fact you traded away Miller, who scored 100 points last year, and it's not rocket science. So that brings us to the deadline in a few days. What do they do in this position? It seems like they're really in no man's land. And in my opinion, they've got to just sell. They've got to sell. The single worst spot to be in sports is what I call the play for the owner stage, where the best case scenario is a couple of home playoff games where the owner can make some extra big bucks. And the worst case scenario is you get a not lottery pick. You're just in that fringe between not quite bad enough to be in the lottery, but not good enough to have any chance in the playoffs. You're just in that area where no fan wants to be at. And it seems like the Canucks owner Aquilini just loves being in that spot. Reporter Rick Dollywall, friend of the show, he had this to say about Aquilini. And quote, he's got a big say. Whether you like it or not, he's got a big say in what happens this week. He would like to make the playoffs. So there it is. It's play for the owner season in Vancouver Canucks land. He wants to make the playoffs, so I'm assuming they're going to try to spend a couple of second and third round picks, which they always do. They never keep those picks, and try to get a couple little rental pieces to see what they can do, and try to get a couple of home game tickets. Try to sell a couple of home game tickets, rather. So I don't know what the Canucks, what their big plan is. But I'm saying at this deadline, I think they need to trade Suter. Obviously, it seems like that's going to happen regardless. But I think Besser should be someone that they really look at moving. First of all, I don't think his trade value will ever be higher than it is right now. Second of all, I don't know how well he fits into this timeline that I'm about to discuss with Quinn Hughes. And third of all, I don't see him being worth the 8 to 8.5 million that he wants to get. He might be worth that to some team. I don't feel like he's worth that to the Canucks right now, who, like I said, are not even close to a move away from being a contender. And obviously, you get rid of Susie, and I think you have a hard conversation about Demko. Like, is this guy going to be able to be a starting franchise goalie for the future when he's just a pure band-aid? I don't know. So I would sell, sell, sell. I would try to get as many assets as I possibly could so you can go for it next year. The Canucks obviously have, not obviously, but they do have nearly $10 million in cap space to spend at this trade deadline. Don't spend it all on players. Spend it on being the middleman, retain salaries, use it to get mid-round draft picks so that you can use those next year to make a potential playoff run. Because on paper, this team's pretty good. Like, Marcus Pettersson has been an awesome acquisition. I think D. Elias Pettersson has been sick. I've loved Hedel. But the timeline for these Canucks is 2 more years. And the reason why I say that is because outside of this year, they have 2 more years of Quinn Hughes on a team-friendly deal. And this guy is a top 5 player in the NHL. He is my favorite player to watch in the league besides Alex Ovechkin, and obviously the goal chase has a lot to do with that. If you lose this guy, Vancouver, that is just a crime against hockey in Canada, in my opinion. That's all-time bad. This is supposed to be a guy who's should be here for his entire career. And what confidence have you given him to think that we are going to consistently be a contender for the rest of his prime? Not much. So for this next 2-year stretch, I need you, Mr. Aquilini and Mr. Alvin and Mr. Tocchet, to instill said confidence. This year, fine. Let him rest up. Sit him down for the rest of the season. I don't care. If they make the playoffs, whatever. Like I said, they're drawing dead in the first round anyways. Next year needs to be the year, and the year after that needs to be the year of the year. We need Pettersson to come back stronger, Hedel to take another step in his development. He's still really young. I like Hedel a lot. And the D-core, it looks actually really good when it's healthy. But we have to get there first because this is a lost season. And I think it's time to admit that, treat it as such, lick our wounds, and move on to next year because I really don't think the hope of this franchise, I don't think the light is turned off yet. But if you lose that franchise defenseman, that top 5 player, man, it's going to be tough scenes in Vancouver for a very long time. You can't do it. This is a 2-year plan now, and this year's done. This year's done. 2 years after that, let's see what happens in Van City. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, I want to know, what did you guys think about what I had to say today? If you disagreed or agreed, please leave something in the comments below. I am small enough as to where I can read all comments and enjoy doing so. Sorry if I was a little rusty today. I obviously haven't done one of these in a little while. I actually had 7 assignments due in 5 days. So I went through the grind of getting through all of those. Apologies for the delay in videos. Please leave a like if you enjoyed what you heard. Please subscribe if you really enjoyed it. Spit Sports are just over 400 subscribers. And as always, I will see you all. Peace out.